Welcome to Entangled Health, where we explore the intersections of quantum science, AI, biotechnology, and human well-being. My name is Thomas, and I'm convinced that health innovation happens at the entangled boundaries where cutting-edge physics meets biology, where consciousness research intersects with technology, and where visionary thinking transforms into practical solutions. We are bringing together pioneers, researchers, and innovators who are reshaping how we understand and experience health. My guest today is Shamini Jain, a psychologist, scientist, and founder of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, or CHI. Shamini is a pioneer in biofield science, exploring the subtle energy fields that connect mind, body, and environment, and she's also a gifted vocalist. Her work bridges cutting-edge science with ancient healing traditions, helping us understand how consciousness and energy influence health. She's the author of the acclaimed book Healing Ourselves. Today, we'll dive into her research on the science of healing, her personal journey as a musician and teacher, connecting science and spirit, and how creativity, voice, and evidence-based practice are shaping the future of integrative health, and much more. A quick disclaimer, all chats at Entangled Health are a co-creation between the guest and myself, and not an official statement from our industries. We are here in a personal capacity, so everything we share is just our own take, not the official view of any company, nor of my employer or any other organization. Yeah, Shamini, thanks so much for making time for this.
Always a pleasure. Yeah.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation because you are one of the reasons I'm doing this. So you gave me the virus to detect biofields, working on consciousness healing, etc. So how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, I'm here in the United States, as you can imagine, which is quite a thing to be in the United States at this time. Amid the snow, enjoying the seasons, and we Southerners here are complaining about the cold, which I'm sure, Thomas, you would just laugh at us. There's like a half inch of snow on the ground, and all the schools are canceled.
We know this in Germany, so you have one snowflake, and the train doesn't run any longer.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. So yeah, just to sort of watching the human story, as I guess we all are these days.
Let me start. So you talk about moving from chaos to coherence, and about bodies going out of tune, with resonance and harmony in the biofield central to the healing. Yeah, so I think that's the fundamental topic. And when you use this language of resonance, coherence, whatever, tuning, are you describing a literal vibrational state that could theoretically, be measured with quantum sensors, whatever stuff we have? Mm-hmm. Or is it a different kind of concept? And if it's literal, would this change the future of medicine? So if we have a measure to, instead of giving drugs, we just do chanting or whatever?
Yes, beautiful question. And a really important question. It really means the first question really that I'm hearing, Thomas, is what do we mean by coherence? And when we speak about it, is it just some sort of hand wavy thing, or is it real? Is it measurable? How does it work? What do we know about it? And yeah, it really depends on the perspective, right? The definition. But if you look at just the general definition, it's sort of a sense, in the vernacular of hanging together, right? And that's actually implied by the physics definition, where coherence doesn't necessarily mean that things are moving exactly on the same waveform point at the same time, but that there is a connection between, particular points, let's say on a sine wave, for example, right? So that's kind of more of a lay physics understanding of coherence. And then there's the psychological definitions of coherence, which, were founded by psychologists. In the Western world, of course, coherence isn't a new topic, but let's just say in the Western psychology field, coherence was something that was talked about many, many decades ago. And it was sort of a sense of internal cohesion with one's own emotions and environment and relationships, right? So all of these things can imply coherence. So when I speak about coherence, I'm speaking about it both from the psychological and physiological point of view. And yes, this is measurable. In psychology, we of course do that by self-reports where we're looking at like that sense of internal cohesion psychologically that someone has. How much do I feel like I'm in resonance with the people around me? How much do I feel like I'm in resonance with my values? These sorts of things are what we explore in psychological coherence. But what's fascinating is that when we explore psychological coherence, we begin to also, when we choose to measure physiology, we begin to actually see measurements of physiological coherence. And there are many groups doing this. Maybe some of your readers are familiar with groups like HeartMath and others.
Yes.
But this is actually quite mainstream. It's not
Mm.
just, some of the leading nonprofit organizations like HeartMath that have been forwarding the study of coherence. Um, there is a whole field of research that is sometimes called hyperscanning. Don't ask me why they use that term. I know there's a reason, but I can't recall it at the back. I always found it kind of odd. It's like, okay, I don't know why you guys decided to call this hyperscanning. But essentially, what they've been doing is looking at physiological coherence between people in different contexts. And this field has really expanded over the last several decades. And the kinds of things that they're finding. So, coherence in what? Like, what are we
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah.
Coherence between hearts, measuring heart rhythms
Mhm.
and, measuring, kind of the trajectory of change in the hearts. Coherence between hearts and brains within a person. So there's heart-brain coherence, and there's even coherence between brains. Now, some of the mainstream hyperscanning research has really focused on brain-to-brain coherence. So literally, they're looking here to see, is there a connection, a measurable connection that implies coherence between people's brains? And if there is, does that kind of map onto a sense of social coherence, right? Is there some connection between the two? So some examples of where we've seen brain to brain coherence, and this is some of the work that we have done at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, but many others as well. Probably not surprisingly, certain aspects of meditation can foster coherence not just within our own brain regions, but also between our brains. But there are other things as well. What we're discovering is even practices that the indigenous traditions have known for millennia that would foster coherence, not just between us as people, but between us and the earth. Their understanding of coherence goes really deep. Well, when we take these metrics of, things like heart rhythms, for example, we actually see evidence for increased coherence with people who sing together, who
Mhm.
dance together.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there is actual increased physiological coherence when we come into community and we do a practice together. It's shared problem solving is another example.
Mhm.
And then there is some evidence, and these studies are published in mainstream journals,
Mhm.
places like PLOS One and others, that are demonstrating that when people come together to work on something, let's say that to share a shared problem, to work on shared problem solving, and they're kind of working, they see evidence for physiological coherence. And that physiological coherence appears to predict cooperative behavior.
Mhm.
So this is where I say there is a way out of the seeming chaos that we sometimes feel, we're in. And that's a whole other definition that we have to unpack, right? What do we mean by chaos? Um, what we know is that simply by coming into certain practices or behaviors together, we can foster coherence between us that's
Mhm.
measurable,
Mhm.
that can support cooperative activity. And I can't think of a better thing that we could be doing together as a humanity is to really sharpen our saw and not just look at this, but practice it.
Mhm. This is interesting, and as you just mentioned, I mean, in sync with Earth, maybe it's at we just see solar flares. I mean, the solar system seems to be just pushing us energy and whatever. And maybe we can discuss this later if this has an impact on these subtle energies. But I was just thinking when you say problem solving together and depending on if you are in a do we see differences if we are together in a room so that it's electromagnetic interaction, or is it triggering, like you say, self-healing, or because we have the same brain patterns individually that does not need to be a link also physically, we are electromagnetic? Any ideas
Yeah,
on that?
we have no idea is the real answer
That's a good
scientifically. We
answer.
barely, how it is in science. We're like, there are a dozen studies, and lay people think, oh, there are a dozen studies. This is proven, and we
Mhm.
scientists are like, we don't know anything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
right.
we don't really because we've only studied this with people in the same room and under certain conditions. We certainly haven't exhausted the conditions. We haven't looked to see whether we can really. We haven't done the deep studies yet to look
Mhm.
at coherence between people across space. Now, one thing about, not to nerd out a little bit, but people, and I know there's
Let's go.
many of the
Let's
people
not.
on your podcast listening are scientists and science minded. So they may wonder, well, how do you even do that? How do you measure coherence? So you have to timestamp it, right? So there is something about like looking at this in time. That out of time is a whole other discussion. But in time, you've got to timestamp everything like really to the millisecond in order to
Yeah.
look for coherence. But there is opportunity for us to be looking at this, more broadly with people living in different places, that kind of thing. HeartMath has done some of that work, or they're exploring that. And I don't know necessarily that they describe it in terms of coherence or synchronization, which are slightly different,
Different, yeah.
terms,
Or
scientific.
resonance, and then you have the resonance part. Yeah.
Yes. But they have published some really provocative data with very large studies with very large numbers of people now across the world, showing evidence for heart rate variability connection, let's just call it that at the moment, with people across the world. And they suspect actually that what's happening is they're resonating with the Earth's magnetic field.
So Schumann, I mean, or I think so. So if we take the, let's say, the path of non-classical Western standard Newton interpretation of the world, and you see the impact of the Schumann resonance, which means the electromagnetic resonance of the Earth, so the vibration, which goes in principle in waves corresponding to alpha and the brain waves, etc. So this definitely makes sense that you have a kind of a carrying medium where you tune in, and then eventually it's even a relative phase.
Yeah.
The fun part I had when we were meeting in back whatever 2018 or when it was, I recall that we have been discussing the different spectra of this biofield idea. So is it electromagnetic? If so, are we talking about hertz? Are we talking about gigahertz? Also, what range of frequencies are we talking? Or are we talking even about something going into resonance more like in quantum terms, you're entangled, non-local entanglement, and we just don't have an explanation for this. Do we have an idea?
Well, we're limited by our methods of measurement, which is true in all of our disciplines, really. But I suspect that what we are discussing as the biofield is, we sometimes say big B biofield is sort of more of a large umbrella term. And I've had scientists complain to me and say, Shamini, well, look, what isn't the biofield then? And, I get it. Like, I get that. And I know how people want to pin it down to like, is it a certain set of frequencies that are measurable? Yes. Is it quantum? Yes. Is it placebo even? Placebo plays a role. So if we look at this as a field of energy and information, then we understand that we're working with a field of energy and information that is both subtle and measurable. Certain aspects are measurable. Certain aspects are harder to measure, defy measurement to date. And here, I'm talking about things like people say, can we measure chi? Can we measure prana? Like, can we pin it down?
Yeah.
No. Can we measure some aspects of it? Can we measure the reverberations of what happens when an energy healer works with someone under carefully controlled, randomized, placebo-controlled trials? And, have we even discovered that compared to these very rigorous, placebo controls, that this biofield, this working with the field, this so-called energy or subtle energy can get under the skin and shift the behavior of cancer cells where we reduce metastasis? Yes. So we can measure those reverberations of the field. We can measure to a certain degree levels of energy coming out of an energy healer's hands, but not all of them. So if we were to apply a purely reductionist approach to the biofield, I think we would really be missing the boat. I think we would only be capturing one aspect of what we're witnessing. And for me, the reason this is important is because my interest is really in understanding the intersections of the biofield with healing. And, over the decades of work that I have done as a researcher, but also as a practitioner and teacher, what I've witnessed is that while there are core commonalities between healers in terms of their process and their experience, their methods and
Which
their
are?
let's talk about those core
Yeah.
aspects. First of all, the first thing that they tell me is stop using the word healer. I don't like it because I'm not doing anything. I am simply a conduit. So there is a sense of a conscious desire to release the egoic attachment to outcome. Let's call it that. Most healers will also get into what they call a space of grounding and clearing. Some call it centering. So that means it's a very embodied practice. Some people may not recognize that. They think, oh, healers, energy, fluffy, out of body stuff. No, healers that I know, and this is pranic healing, this is healing touch, therapeutic touch, Reiki, Satnam Rasayam, Joe Ray. There's so many practices, ancient and modern, reconnective healing, like so many. They all get into a place of non egoic attachment. They ground in their bodies, they get into their bodies and they center. And then they allow for however they describe this energy, source, universal life energy, prana, chi, whatever it is, to simply flow through them to the recipient, to the patient. So they are the conduit, they are not egoically doing. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have many of them will have processes and protocols, right? Some don't. Some just literally hold space. Like in Satnam Rasayan, it literally means like you're holding the field and the field is aligning the person. But what they all say is, whatever the processes and protocols are, I'm allowing, I am a conduit, and I'm allowing for the energy to move as it needs to move so that the person receiving the energy is able to ignite their own healing process. So in science, we call this, essentially stimulating the process of salutogenesis. Salutogenesis, the process of healing instead of pathogenesis. Yes. Yeah, to get out of the way and facilitate the body's natural ability to heal itself because we do this all the time. And so, honestly, a lot of what we've learned from placebo research is really how to get out of our own way, how to get out of our heads. Like the most important thing is, for clinicians, I would say, is minimizing nocebo responses. And there's a lot we need to know. Nocebo then is the opposite of placebo for those who aren't familiar. And it means literally expecting a negative outcome and then being more likely to receive a negative outcome because of that expectation. It's been deeply studied. It's very real. And unfortunately, it's quite powerful. And one of the reasons is because it works with, the brain circuits that process trauma and self-referential thought. And, those are really sticky circuits, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So that's why nocebo responses can be very strong, but placebo can too. So we know that things like having a positive expectation, um, having good experiences that guide the body mind to expect a better experience the next time around. Say I go and lay on a massage table, I have a fabulous massage. The next time I lay on that table, I'm going to, expect to have a fabulous massage. My body's already going to start to relax. So that's more of the conditioning learning aspect. Expectation is conscious, like, right? I'm going into this doctor's office and I think this is a good doctor and I think this doctor's going to help me, right? That's part of the placebo response. Then there's ritual and relationship. Rituals in everything. Indigenous medicine practitioners and healers knew this. Their understanding of ritual again is deeper than Western science because they knew that ritual was opening consciousness, fully opening consciousness and opening consciousness in a way that one could be guided by benevolent spirits, that ancestors could come in and guide healing. All of those aspects are there in our indigenous traditions. But even in modern day traditions, simple rituals, even including self-care rituals where we allow ourselves to wind down, we shut our computers at a certain amount of time, we have a nice cup of relaxing tea, we do a little meditation. Those are healing rituals. And what they're doing is setting up the nervous system for a better healing response, stimulating the pathways of salutogenesis. So these are the placebo factors that, I call heal factors, holistic elements that activate life force. And life force is, of course, provocative for scientists, but it links to this idea that the healing force is connected to what the ancients have called life force, and that is connected to the biofield. So, full circle, when healing practitioners are working with energy, on the physical level, what is happening, we suspect it's interesting actually, there's more and more data coming out that actually suggests that when people are first receiving a healing and when healers are doing a healing, there's actually an activation of the sympathetic nervous system
Yes. Yeah.
initially,
Mhm.
and then there's almost like a parasympathetic rebound. So there is a process going on that you can track in the physiology with the connection with this field and what it's doing downstream. Then we study downstream markers like immune system function,
Mhm, mhm,
hormones
mhm.
function, and things like that. But there is this immediate response that we're beginning to measure, recipients and with healers themselves, that something is physiologically happening,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering because you again mentioned the Reiki and stuff. So this is also physical proximity and
Yeah,
and
not always, right? There are studies, there are many
remote
studies
healers.
on
Okay,
distance healing and
okay.
remote healing, absolutely, there should be more. The data is really mixed, it's very equivocal, we would say, because the studies are interesting, let's just say it this way. The studies are definitely done by scientists, not by clinicians. So they're doing things that we would think in clinical practice are really weird, like, that wouldn't make sense in a clinical
Yeah.
context.
Okay.
Where, like, and I understand why we've done the studies that way. Um, but they're framed from more of, let's say, a cognitive psychology frame point than, say, an effectiveness trial or something like that, where you're really looking at real practice and how people actually do things. Having said that, if we were wanting to look at it more mechanistically, I think some of the early research that was done by our dear colleagues, Dean Radin and Marilyn Schlitz back in the day, when they looked at distant intentionality, they actually were able to show under very carefully controlled conditions with people being completely separated in space that one could intend to affect the physiology of another person and that was measurable via skin conductance, heart rate, and other measures.
Yeah. 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 And then it makes, on the one hand, I mean, I think we need to move beyond these four-dimensional explanations of space, time, electromagneticity, etc. So the classical waves to maybe a different higher dimensional, however we might call it. Because if we say we have the possibility of healing via intention, and they sit in a magnetically shielded chamber. I mean, I've talked to Dean, and I think I even visited him in Petaluma. So, I mean, they're in principle shielded from the fact that we could work via the Earth magnetic resonance field. So it would not work because it's electromagnetically shielded, but still it works because you trigger this self-healing. And this I think is eventually something that is currently yet not explored. And I hope to find an inspiration how to measure this with eventually quantum sensors that have access to higher dimensions.
Yeah.
We're just not sure yet how, but in principle, you would be able to say, I have a new kind of sensor which is not necessarily limited to the classical physical world, but to, I mean, work with Aharonov boom effect or whatever to shift the potentiality of collapsing to X or Z.
Yeah.
Do we have done work on that, or is it just me being
The
crazy?
closest thing is that you're probably aware of is the use of random event generators,
Yes.
which the supposition or the hypothesis for those who are using them, right, is that it's sort of measuring some kind of fluctuation, right? Some kind of fluctuation that might be related to entanglement in some way. But, can we prove that? I'm not really sure that we can. Again, like, do we know exactly what the mechanism is, especially in these cases where we are seeing changes in physiology from person to person at a distance with intention or healing work. So, yes, we see the changes in the physiology, and we see that those changes in physiology can be reliable. But do we understand exactly how it is happening yet? No, we don't. And I agree with you, Thomas. I think part of that is a measurement issue. And that may shift in time as we get better and better and more nuanced. Right now, I'd say the exciting thing for me in the field, having been in this field for decades and standing on the shoulders of giants who were in the fields decades before me, is that we're finally really moving from what my students like to call from woo to true. It's
Yes.
one of the reasons they really
From
love
woo to true. Okay, cool.
woo to true. They say, we love what you're doing, Shamini, with the Consciousness and Healing Initiative and your book and all, because you're putting real metrics and science to things that we're seeing in our clinical practice and things that we've experienced as patients,
Mhm,
helping us understand that this is real.
mhm.
It's not only real, it's plausible, it's powerful, and it deserves to be studied. We don't have all the answers. But I think what excites me the most about this is that it really speaks to the power of our interconnection.
Mhm.
And that's what I think the real promise is of the biofield. Because some people may say, well, so what does this mean for me, man? Like, should I go get acupuncture? Should I go do meditation? Should I go see an energy healer? Like on the practical level, what's so great about energy? And I think when we contract these all into like kind of interventions for self-care, not that those aren't important. We look at the whole picture of the biofield and we look at the science of the biofield. And we understand that when we look at these healers, they're telling us something profound about our abilities to connect with each other, to feel and heal each other, to recognize that we're not separate from each other, to recognize that we are deeply connected with the earth and that that's palpable. And so to me, ultimately, it leads us back into the practice too,
Hmm.
because the science is really important and could truly revolutionize the way we even think about biology, in addition to other disciplines. These transdisciplinary efforts are really important to move science forward. But what about what it means for us as a humanity at this time?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Does this mean that if I choose to send light to all of those who are suffering in Minneapolis right now in the United States, that may have an effect? Some of the data so far published with, decades ago with the TM Siddhi program with Maharishi International University and others suggests that that is actually measurable. They did dozens of studies with advanced meditators who all meditated with a common intention, for example, to reduce crime in a particular area, and they saw those outcomes. But it's epidemiological, it's messy. They had on and off conditions. They did notice that when they stopped meditating, the crime rates did go up.
Wow.
But yeah, yeah. Um, but there is research like that, and so ultimately it comes back to coming back into our power, recognizing that our energy is our power. In fact, the true definition of power is the capable use of energy. It's not all of the toxic masculine overlays that we think power is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually, the capable
The,
use of energy.
you mean the responsible use of energy? So being aware that your thoughts might have or do have an impact on reality, at least on your reality. And that's anyhow the question. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. If we are all selves living in our own world, so why is there a world outside? But I think we don't go into this discussion. I think what you just mentioned reminds me of so singing together. So the power of singing together. I mean, as a musician, being on stage and feeling the vibes. I mean, we all talk about vibes, and if you do a good performance or you play a solo and you see the audience reacting, so you get energy back, etc. Um, so can you tell? I want to build a bridge to vocal biomarkers. Our last discussion in Basel. Um, um,
Well, that's something you can tell me more about, I'm
yeah,
sure.
maybe, maybe in a few minutes. But let me just. Can you share a bit on your experience? What you how does it feel when you do this? I think you published something on the on the
Mm.
power of and on how this might trigger the nadis and things like this.
Yes, yes.
Can you
So
tell
it's
more
all
about
the
your
way
perspective?
again, all the way healing is all the way from the subtle to the very physical, right? And my
Mm-hmm.
experience with sound has been very much like that. It was my early experiences with singing itself that just brought me home to my essence, to my soul, whatever you'd want to call it. Even just singing pop music, it just brought me home. It was more than just self-soothing. But there is a self-soothing aspect to it too. So from a physiological perspective, we know that making sound and, singing will shift the hormonal balance in our bodies to a more positive one. It can increase oxytocin. It can
Mm-hmm.
increase endogenous opioids, things like that. My experience personally with singing as a performer too, because I've done a lot of different kind of singing. So I didn't realize until one day my healing teacher I was, at that time very active in a heavy metal tribute band. So there's a
The
lot of
Arends, was it?
stage. Yes, it was wonderful. It's still going, by the way. We have our 10th anniversary show in San Diego in April, and all the founding members are coming. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to go and sit in with the band again. But that kind of singing, full force singing, really strong singing, like, really have to open up the vocal channels, talk about channeling. It's well, you're running a lot of energy. You're running you're working your core, you're running around on stage and all of that. So of course you feel completely elated. And then when you've got 1,000 people singing with you, because Iron Maiden fans love to sing Iron
Yeah.
Maiden with you, which is what makes it so amazing. It's, of course, it's completely ecstatic. It's beautiful. So there's that very strong, palpable feeling that we can get when we're singing on stage or even singing in groups. People have
Mhm.
experienced this, right? It doesn't have to be heavy metal. It can
Mhm.
be devotional singing of all kinds, kirtan, bhajan, church gospels,
Mhm.
all these traditions that we see, that ecstatic Sufi singing, like, Qawwali, like there's so many traditions new of that. And the esoterics of that, for those who are tuned into it. And of course, this is taught to some degree in some of these spiritual traditions. You're learning how to work with your energy, their
Mhm.
biofield, if you will, to raise your own energy and vibration. And so they describe it often as even, the movement of energy up the spine, through the chakras, expanding awareness, expanding connection with the divine, all for the purposes of connecting with the divine. So this is deep ancient science, let's say
Mhm.
deep ancient knowledge that has existed in many cultures.
Mhm.
We know that singing can bring us back to our connection with the divine. And that is the most profound thing about it for me.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if this is eventually due to, I mean, if you ground yourself, you say you're grounded with the earth, and then, I mean, you just have these vibrations. So you trigger yourself mechanical vibrations. So if you start singing, and then you have the overtones, and then maybe you have mechano activated stretch channels or whatever. So I have seen work that people say around 40 hertz you have a resonance peak in brain activity, and this is triggered by mechano activated ion channels. Yeah, so just for that. And then, do you think there is an, let's say, Western explicable effect also behind this, that this triggers, I don't know, specific resonance patterns that then bypass the amygdala or whatever to open something, hormonal release, to activate a hidden pattern? So if we say the brain waves are just spiking patterns, just
Uh-huh.
uh, that you are able to unlock the frequency that might be blocked these days, because we're just living on Earth, without living with the Earth, but on the Earth. So
Yeah.
maybe we have some toxins, mental or physical toxins, that are bypassed by this escalation chanting.
Yes, the latter I think is incredibly relevant, especially when you look to the ancient teachings of
Hmm.
mantra practice as an example of that. First of all, those words that are used in the chants are not random words, and they are known to be the literal vibrational um, resonance of a divine quality, a quality of consciousness, let's say. And so when we chant these words, which are not random, in Sanskrit, they are they are to resonate the field to bring us closer to that aspect of consciousness. That's how it's understood. So initially, mantras, yantras, which are the geometric forms, were all different aspects of our divine consciousness that we could come into contact with.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then, of course, later, to make it easier for people to understand, they began to be personified as gods and goddesses. So, in practice, you can connect with the form of a deity, but you can also connect with the sonic vibration of it or the geometrical vibration of it. There are different ways to connect in, but what is actually happening from the spiritual perspective is that you are, in fact, expanding your ability to connect with that field. And when you do that, you're able to sort of let go a little better of like the mental emotional conditioning that you're carrying that keeps you small, how,
Hmm.
so to speak. So imagine that
Hmm.
we keep ourselves small because we carry trauma, we carry patterns, we carry
A
ruminative
body.
thinking, we carry, yeah, we carry all these things. And so the point of focus, to be able to focus on the mantra, ultimately, the initial part is concentration, just to be able to concentrate the mind. But what you're doing is it's not just mental, you're also building the field, and you're linking the field with the mental aspects of concentration. Now, ultimately, what happens is the mantra chants you. Once the field of concentration is established, you will feel those vibrations. And so in the Vedic sciences, they describe sound is having four major, aspects, you can say, that go from the most gross to the most subtle aspects of sound. So in mantra, this is why sometimes when we chant, we don't just hear it, but even if we're chanting silently or whatever, we can feel it. That's madhyama. That's actually one of the four aspects of sound. So there's sound in the physical, which is vikri. There's sound in the subtle, which is madhyama. There is sound as experienced in light, because sometimes when people are chanting, they actually, they get the experience of light. That's pashanti. This is all written by the sages based on direct experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then ultimately, sound itself as unbounded consciousness. So, in many traditions, and certainly in the Vedic and Hindu traditions, the links of sound with consciousness are deep and
Yeah,
profound. It's why we
yeah,
say Nada Brahma, the world is sound, right?
yeah,
In the
yeah.
beginning was the word. It's all of that.
Yeah, and I've seen this so many. So I try to read the Upanishads. So I'm not sure if I understood them, but at least I tried. And I think if you are born in the, let's say, Vedic traditions, so outside of Western Europe, to say, or at least in the Western, so if you're born with this, so you have it. So ideally you speak Sanskrit. So I was always not clear what to make out of Sanskrit, but there seems to be really something like a hidden ancient truth which is
Mhm.
explored once you just use it. So there's this, let's say, this LP, and then you just play the groove, and then by playing the groove, you have access to something else. And do you think that we should, or we could include these ancient Vedic obviousness into Western practice?
Oh, yeah, well, it's absolutely being done already. I mean, there's several studies already on mantra and its effects on the cardiovascular system.
Okay, I
Very
didn't know.
strong evidence in reducing blood pressure, improving cardiovascular health, reducing anxiety. There's some really interesting studies that were done actually in San Diego, including the San Diego VA and UC San Diego, where they actually gave patients with PTSD a choice as to what kind of mantra they would choose from, or an affirmation, if you will. It was slightly different from mantra, actually. I would call it more affirmation, but essentially like a holy saying, like a holy word or a holy saying that could come from the tradition of Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Jainism or Hinduism. And
Okay,
so people would pick. And they even did studies comparing those with just like general affirmative words that weren't considered holy. And they saw differences. And,
okay,
importantly, again, for the patients, this benefited them. There were reductions in post-traumatic stress, reductions in anxiety.
yeah.
These things really have effects on people.
And I'm just out of curiosity, but did it matter if it was, let's say, Judaism or Christian, or rather the
I don't
Vedic,
think they
or
saw
no?
any differences
It's
between.
just different perspectives on the holiness
Yeah,
in principle.
it's really, I think we have to think about it as alignment. These are
Hmm.
words that bring us into alignment with the deeper aspects of who we are
Hmm.
beyond our mental emotional conditioning. That's
Hmm.
really, what it is, because
Hmm.
we are divine. We are that. Our unbounded consciousness having a conscious experience. And so sometimes when we get stuck, these spiritual practices remind us that we are more than just our minds or even our emotions.
I ask you a controversial question. This transhumanism, trying to mess with the human body by whatever, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, because I think if we say Greg Braden or whatever, we have our genes for a good reason, yeah,
Yeah.
and we are a sacred, and we are sacred ourselves. So our body is sacred. If we now start treating cancer with CRISPR therapies, I mean, is this dangerous, or is it not dangerous? Are there, from your perspective, are there potential guidelines that we say, okay, you can do the obvious thing, but don't mess it too much? I'm just undecided.
Yeah, it's true because it's a big field and there's always trepidation about technology. Um, And, I understand Greg's perspective and completely. And what we can say about, the science of it from the biology is that it truly is use it or lose it. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the concern with some of this is that, if we get lazy, then we will basically put ourselves in positions where if we want to take the easy way out and not train our physiology, to heal ourselves, for example, by doing these kinds of self care practices, by expanding our consciousness. And we just rely on pushing a button to optimize our physical state. We lose these other aspects of being able to advance our humanity. And I think that's the greater concern.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Mm-hmm.
that mean that we shouldn't use the best of science to help facilitate healing? Absolutely not. Like, there things happening with Neuralink and whatever that, if applied correctly, the quality of life of so many patients can greatly improve,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean everyone should be using Neuralink? You
Maybe
know?
not.
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate for that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, 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 yeah. And I think it's coming back to the self empowerment. So maybe you just need a permission slip to say I think of prayer. Others say, okay, I have to physically chant to trigger, and then I go the next level. Or and the other guys say, okay, I'm more on a different state of our cosmic evolution cycle. Maybe I'm a
Right.
bit I'm a bit lower. So I for me it works to just tune my genes or switch things off or switch other things on, because I just wait for my next iteration on life in a new body to go more. This is this something that makes sense
I think
from?
so, and, one thing I tell patients, because a lot of folks, Biofield fits squarely in the area of what we've been calling integrative medicine or whole person health. And it's really important that people recognize that even things like energy healing are not necessarily done as alternatives. And most energy healers don't advocate for them as alternatives, say, to modern medicine. Okay. It's considered to be part of an integrative approach. It's not anti that. But when patients are questioning, what do I do? What do I do? The first thing I tell them is to tune in and listen to your body. Like your body knows the answers. And sometimes the worry and the anxiety and the information overload and all of that will have us questioning, like, do I take this hormone? Do I go for chemotherapy? What do I do? If I go to chemotherapy, does that mean I can't do energy work? Or if I do energy work, does that mean I shouldn't do chemotherapy? All these questions come up. The first thing is just to make sure that we're taking a pause, taking a breath, and asking our bodies, like really listening for the answer beyond the fear. Most of the issues that we have is that we're being so conditioned with fear right now. So many people are kind of inundating us with stimuli that make us feel fearful. So the first thing we have to do is clear that fear so that we can listen to what the body is saying. And hey, there's no judgment. Like, what's your intention? If your intention is that I want to live to 162 and have the most perfect body ever so that I can make the most money and be the most productive person I can and make a gazillion dollars, and that's your thing, then transhumanism is probably right up your alley,
Mm, mm,
because it's all about performance and performance metrics and running
mm.
your body like a machine, from my
Yeah,
point of view. That's
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
seeing.
Mm, mm,
But I think most of us don't really want to live like that.
mm.
I think most of us want to live a life that's in harmony
Yeah, fulfilling. Yeah.
and fulfilling, that has meaning, that has purpose, that has connection, and that we embrace the natural cycle of life, which is generative, orchestrative, and destructive in nature. We are nature. We're meant to die.
Yes.
And if you believe, of course, in the soul, then if the soul aspect is eternal. Now, some people will say, okay, that's just a way of us making peace with death. We create this thing called the soul so we can make peace with death. Fine, whatever you want to say, but we could just sit with the reality. We're all going to die.
Very
So,
likely.
what kind of life do we want to
At
live?
least our body is going to die.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just it's something that you mentioned when we need to detox in principle. So just calm down. I mean, that's nothing new, but it's so hard to do and harder these days with all the whatever TikTok and digital drugs that we have, etc. And I was just thinking about these cleansing rituals that you earlier mentioned, and then also eventually using scent or subtle material components like running around with sage or whatever, or I mean, all the Christian, or they have something like holy smoke, or everybody has a holy smoke somewhere. You can even have holy smoke like this. Is this also, asking you as a medical doctor or as a clinician, is this
Yeah, full disclosure, I'm not a medical doctor.
yeah, or yeah, but is this used in modern studies to evaluate the effect of helping people to come to themselves just for the
Well,
sake
there
of
are,
cleansing?
yeah, there's a lot more traditionally, well, not traditionally, let's say currently,
Mm,
there are very few studies on indigenous medicine practices because there
mhm,
hasn't been enough trust between the
mhm,
scientific community and the indigenous communities to be able to
mhm.
do these studies. I'm hoping that we will be changing that.
Okay.
And we're
Yeah.
certainly making inroads at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. We take that very seriously. We have very strong indigenous representation in our Healing Practitioners Council.
Mhm.
And actually, currently, I'm helping foster potential collaborations between university researchers and indigenous healers.
Yeah,
So,
because I think that that's ancient tradition. I mean, ancient wisdom we just lose.
and we haven't even touched technology, but there's interest
Yeah.
also in indigenous technologies and how they may inform modern day technologies with respect to the biofield. So there's a whole playground here to
Mhm.
explore if we can do this collaboratively and respectfully. But with respect to sage and holy smoke and things like that, now that people have been looking, they recognize that some of these substances are actually antimicrobial and antibacterial,
So the
right?
classical
Example.
pathway. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
classical pathway. So when you look at it from the lens of chemistry, you say, "Oh, okay, maybe this isn't so woo-woo after all."
Like, for example, I mean, we also work on electroceuticals. You just take something, you stimulate the vagus nerve, and then you reduce cholesterol. So bingo, of course, you get less cancer. I mean, that's just the obvious pathway. So this same then just with sense, smoke, scenting, just to say there are classical anti-microbiologics or whatever that help out. Okay. Okay. I have one thing that I also wanted to ask you is, um, what question would you wish that people would ask you more?
Yeah. Well, I will say that I do get this question, but I think we don't maybe do it enough with each other, which is just, how are you doing? How are you? And really like pausing for the answer. So instead of like that introductory, hi, how are you? Because we've been taught, to do that, to open the conversation or before trying to get what we want or move on to the next thing. Like literally sitting in presence and saying, what's in the field for you? Like, what's exciting you? How are you? And really just honoring that time with the other person to really, again, feel into the field between us, um, and start the conversations that way. I think that's so powerful. And I've noticed with the leaders that I'm with that take the time to do that, and they're people that have startup, not even startup, but, venture funds of, hundreds of millions of dollars, or key leaders that aren't necessarily even spiritual leaders. There's something about the quality of presence when we can sit with each other and really take in the answer to how are you, and also feel like we could actually give an honest response, that's so beautiful. And to me, that reflects the essence of healing in a way, because ultimately it's all about connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. So if I ask you, how are you? Do we have time to do we want to take the time?
Yeah, I would say I'm good, Thomas. I'm actually feeling so much more elevated and happy from our conversation. It's so good to see you. It's so good to talk with you and explore, all of the frontiers that we're just beginning to uncover in this field, and the impact that it could have for healing and for each other. So you have left me feeling more energized and more excited than I was before our conversation, and I hope that our listeners feel the same.
This is good. Thanks for that. The small things. we can contribute. Yeah.
Yeah, we all can contribute with our presence. That's the bottom line.
I've seen, by the way, I'm on Substack since a few weeks. I'm on Substack, and there are tons of fantastic people on Substack. I have not seen you yet, but maybe you come.
Eventually, I would like to have some time to do that.
Yeah, me too. And there was one post I've seen, which is not the classic Ubuntu. So we are all in this, but there's another term to see. Just say I see you. So the message that you just said. So the taking more time, just recognizing the other, even if you don't have time, say I've seen you, and then ideally, of course, go the next way and just take time, talk to each other, and say, how are you? So this is a good guidance. So I will take this. I will take this. I'm not sure how much time we have for because I've seen your calendar.
Well, thank you for having me with you.
Yeah, then Shamini, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And I really hope to connect with you. And maybe next time we talk about the vocal biomarkers, because we're just working a bit on this. I'm not sure if we have a good scientific things. But I mean, just to tell you, the working hypothesis is that eventually, as you said, our voice is carrying all the complex information.
Yes.
Of us being in permanent superposition between how are you? Yes, I'm good here, but I'm broke. And on the other hand, I'm happy because I did it. So all these complex dimensions that they're somehow reflected in the voice, and we could make use of the voice as a quality of life biomarker to
100%. And there are researchers at universities already looking into this. So yes. And it is essentially a biofield measure.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on this note, if you want, let's just close this, and we maybe schedule us another call in half year or so, if you're up to it, and discuss the vocal biomarker topic, because I have 2 or 3 people I would love to bring together with. I mean, you've seen them in Basel.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
Dear friends, we are now entangled. Thanks for listening and for being part of this experiment at the intersection of quantum tech and health. If today's conversation sparked an idea, a critique, or triggered a question, please share it, and maybe your question is selected in a future episode out of the growing pool. And you know the game. If you like it, please subscribe, leave a rating, and entangle further by passing this episode to someone you think should join the gang. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep exploring the unseen with Entangled Health.